Rob Portman faces a tough vote on health care, and Chris Spielman carries the flag for former athletes. Joining us on Columbus on the Record this week, Chrissy Thompson, Columbus Bureau Chief for the Cincinnati Enquirer, Terry Casey, Republican strategist, and Sandy Tice, Executive Director for Progress Ohio. In the end, Senator Rob Portman says he was opposed to the revised Senate health care bill after all. The Republican didn't have to be the one, however, that killed it, because two other senators took the hit for that. Portman also said this week he would not be for an outright repeal of Obamacare, even though he voted for just that in 2015. President Trump still hopes to win over Portman and other skeptical Republicans.
Frankly, I don't think we should leave town unless we have a health insurance plan, unless we can give our people great health care, because we're close. We're very close. Any senator who votes against starting debate is really telling America that you're fine with Obamacare.
Portman says he is not fine with Obamacare. He wants to repeal it, but only if they can replace it with a plan that protects low-income Ohioans now using Medicaid. Chrissy Thompson, he faces a lot of pressure if the vote comes up next week whether to vote to repeal Obamacare after promising it for all these years.
He faces it honestly on both sides. Right now he's under a lot of attack from conservatives who say that he promised. He voted, to repeal it 2 years ago when he knew that it would be vetoed. So was that disingenuous? That sort of thing. But also, there have been a lot of liberals that have been lobbying him, camping out in his offices, things like that. So it's really interesting. Rob Portman doesn't face re-election for 6 years. If there's anybody in the country who can make a tough decision right now and weather whatever storm comes from it, it's Rob Portman, and maybe this is a moment that he wants to be in, somebody who actually really is going to hold a big decision in his hands.
To that point, Terry, why use it? I mean, even on the revised bill, he waffled until it was over. Then he said, I'm opposed to it. He didn't say that I'm opposed to it right off the bat. He's got nothing to lose. He's got 5 plus years before he has to run for re-election.
You're shocked that politicians flip-flop and waffle and other things. The real problem is we want better health care, but the problem is whether it was the original Obamacare, called Affordable Health Care Act, did nothing to deal with affordability. The real problem is who's going to pay. And this is both on the insurance plan, because it costs a lot of money and there's no way to fund it. And then there's the bigger problem of Medicaid, which is now up to 37% of Ohio's budget. And if it keeps going and growing, there won't be any money left for K through 12, for higher ed, for other kind of things. So neither party has got the answer because healthcare is very complicated. And in today's New York Times, a very good column by J.D. Vance, where he said government's part of the problem because on healthcare, medicine, it's the patent laws of America and some of the other laws that have allowed some of these things.
So we're going to blame patent law now for the healthcare crisis?
Well, but that's the government, and that's part of it because prescription medicines are more and more a part of it, and part of it is the health companies, greedy as they are. They use those patent laws to pick it up.
It was.
This is a health care law that the doctors are opposed to, the nurses, the Ohio Hospital Association, the American Hospital Association, the advocates for the poor, the advocates for the kids, the advocates for the seniors. Nobody likes it because it's terrible.
Well, those first folks you mentioned, they like the current law because it doesn't have price controls. So they don't want to see their bottom line affected. The Hospital Association, the drug companies, the doctors.
I think some of them, I think that's a problem with some of them, but I think John McCain and Sherrod Brown were right when they said, what we have doesn't work. Let's fix it. Let's have both parties work together. Ohio is uniquely positioned to do that. We elected a Democrat and we elected a Republican. So we tolerate, believe in divided government. Those two are pretty smart guys, and I think they need to get together with some of their peers and try to come up with a good solution.
Chrissy, Portman says that the situation in Ohio has changed, that insurers are pulling out, premiums are higher, and that's why he's not going to vote to repeal Obamacare. Well, those two things show that maybe Obamacare is not working, so why wouldn't you want to repeal it? doesn't seem to make sense to me.
What he is pointing to is uncertainty. He keeps bringing this up, and this is the reason that Anthem gave, for instance, when they pulled out of Ohio. That was a huge national story. It's left so far. We've got about 19 counties that we have to come up with some sort of insurer for people who need to buy off the exchange, and Portman seems to have accepted that rationale that a repeal without a replacement or a repeal with a lot of questions, maybe a quick repeal or a repeal that would leave maybe a lot of people without coverage, just introduces way too much uncertainty into the system, and that it's irresponsible. And the problem with that argument is, again, that probably that would have been the same situation 2 years ago, except for that Rob Portman knew that President Obama would veto the repeal bill.
And in all honesty, historically, the Democrats had control of Congress by bigger margins than the Republicans now in '09. It took them 13 months to get Obamacare. This is a fifth of the economy, and part of the problem in America is if you compare to Japan and Europe, healthcare costs about 9 to 10% of their GDP. Here it's about 18%. So nobody has the courage or can figure out a good way to bend the cost curve that's out of control in healthcare. And how do you get that managed better, because there's too many jobs, too much money at stake?
Do you think that Republicans should punt on this, because this is standing in the way of anything else? Tax reform, infrastructure plan, anything else they want to get done?
Well, we can't get around the fact that Obamacare is failing and it's not
some would
working.
disagree that it's failing, it needs fixing.
Well, but if you talk to people that have to, in the real world, who have to get coverage, and even if they can get insurance, if you're getting insurance and your deductible is going to be $14,000, that's insurance on paper, but not really anything effective on health care. So we've got a real problem, and the affordability and the costs, and also the huge percentage, a small number of people gobble up such a percentage of health care, particularly at the end of people's lives. And it's hard to talk about those issues.
All right, let's get to our next topic. There's strong indication that the biggest named Democrat will run for governor next year. Another top Democrat says Richard Cordray is in. Ohio Supreme Court Justice Bill O'Neill was considering a bid for governor, but he says he will not run because Richard Cordray will. The former Ohio Attorney General now heads the nation's top consumer finance watchdog agency. Some Democrats don't want him to leave that one post, that one key post left over from the Obama administration. Cindy Tice, is Richard Cordray going to be in come the fall?
I think all the tea leaf readers think he is going to get in, and if he gets in, I think that's great. I think he would join a team of impressive Democrats, and I get really annoyed when I hear people talk about how we don't have a bench. Other than the 4 years when Ted Strickland was in office, the Republicans have controlled our state for decades. And where are we? Our economy trails the federal economy. We can't keep our babies alive. We have a terrible infant mortality rate. We lead the nation in opioid overdose deaths. And our charter schools are so bad that we are made fun of at national charter school conferences. The Republicans who are all running for governor have to share the blame in that. And I think that if Donald Trump told us anything, this is the year of the outsider. I think this is a really good shot for any Democrat who gets the nomination.
Terry?
Well, Cordray has this one little problem. When you look at his one congressional run and his statewide races, I think there's 5 or 6 races there. Not once did he beat a name established Republican. He beat a couple no names, and then he lost a number of different times. So Cordray is very bright, he's very savvy, but his real problem, and I think, Mike, I said this on one of the earlier shows, when Trump fired the FBI director, Cordray should have called the president and say, please fire me and make me a victim and help me raise lots of money. If he does resign in order to run for governor, how does he raise the money? How does he put together the team? Because Cordray, again, very bright, very savvy, but he hasn't been that good of a candidate when you actually look at the details of every one of his statewide races and his one congressional race.
He has a really good consumer story to tell. You look at all the millions of dollars that he has returned to the consumers from the lenders, the banks, the financial services sector. I think that's really meaningful to people. I think they're going to care about that.
Because he has to do one thing in particular, and he has to energize voters in Northeast Ohio, win back those voters in the Youngstown area. Can he do that? Central Ohio guy, no roots up there.
And not the world's most charismatic person. Just being honest. This is a really interesting field. If it ends up expanding to 5, you could look at somebody getting in the low 20% and being the nominee. And, every single candidate has some sort of name recognition challenge across the state. So I sort of see them almost picking pockets and focusing, Joe Schiavone just trying to turn out people who know him in Northeast Ohio. And Cordray hasn't been here for a while, so you have to wonder, where his pocket is exactly. I'm actually not convinced he's going to get in. I understand a lot of people think he is, but there's a lot that could happen between now and then, I'm not sure that with some momentum that someone like Nan Whaley has right now.
Mayor of Dayton, yep.
That's right. So she has picked up and will keep picking up mayoral endorsements because she knows all these mayors. So that's going to help her across the state. You look at somebody like a Betty Sutton, her play is that she can get the national money. So, she's trying to get as much of that right now. We'll see in about a week or two how much she's raised.
So you think all these folks will stay in, Sandy?
I think we're going to start to see it winnow. And one of the things that's happened in the last couple of weeks is Betty Sutton start to pick up a lot of labor endorsements. And they're regional ones so far, but there's a lot of them. And I understand there's more coming. So I think when those types of things start to happen, the field will start to narrow. And I'm also still hearing, I can't believe it, that Jerry Springer might get in. He paid a hooker with a check that bounced.
I don't apologized for it.
Oh, yeah, right.
And he's lived in Florida for the past 20 years and hadn't paid Ohio
and
taxes.
Says he's not running.
Right. But I think the fact that Democrats are so excited about Cordray tells you that the other 4 people, nice people that they are, but basically are minor league, B-level people not ready for governor.
All right. The secret ballot is sacrosanct, but the privacy of voter information has come into question in recent months. It turns out that John Kasich supporters were using voter information to encourage, some would say shame, New Hampshire voters to go to the polls in last year's primary. And President Trump continues to criticize states like Ohio that have refused to hand over private voter information to his Election Integrity Commission.
One has to wonder what they're worried about. And I asked the vice president, I asked the commission, what are they worried about? There's something. There always is.
Secretary of State John Husted says he's worried about voter privacy, so he has refused to hand over Social Security numbers of registered voters. Trump's commission is investigating his unfounded allegations of widespread voter fraud in the 2016 election. Chrissy, you covered the New Hampshire primary a lot. We know through a name change and some financial records that it was this PAC supporting Kasich that sent out those mailers. What exactly was going on up there?
Well, it's interesting because most of what we saw in the lead up to the New Hampshire primary, I guess that was just last year. It seems either very recent or very long ago, but most of what we saw was phone banking. We saw Kasich publicly slamming the PAC that we knew was supporting him for running negative ads. But this group had such a well-disguised name that we had no idea it was associated with Kasich at all. So this was honestly not something that I knew about at the time. Yeah. And there were complaints that went to the New Hampshire Attorney General, but there was no way to trace them to Kasich.
So they were sending out mailers saying you haven't voted in the last 5 years or 5 cycles or something like that, and you should vote this time.
And I might clarify, having been on the Board of Elections for 14 years in Franklin County, certain things are public record, like are you registered, have you voted, included in primaries, and if you request an absentee ballot, those are things that all the counties in Ohio, you can find out who's requested, who's returned it, who hasn't. Your privacy of actually how you vote is fully protected. And Social Security numbers, Houston didn't want to give up the last 4 digits because legitimate privacy kind of reasons. But certain parts of the election process are public record, and both sides, Democrat and Republican, will work and push people who have voted, people who haven't voted.
But this took it to a different level, though. This wasn't just calling somebody who hasn't voted yet. This was publicly saying you haven't voted in these elections and you should.
And this is part of a trend. We've started to see this in the last couple cycles where you engage in voter shaming, and a lot of people don't know that stuff is a public record, and they don't want their neighbors to know that they don't participate in the democratic process. And this was part of Kasich's all New Hampshire strategy. I mean, he put all of his eggs in that basket, and it helped him. He came in second.
It did help him. It was the most positive thing that happened to him besides winning Ohio. I do think, though, it's very interesting if this group had been more, if we had known it was associated with Kasich, then reporters would have been asking Kasich questions about it, and he, I can almost guarantee, would have said this is a terrible thing and they need to stop doing it, and they would have been forced to stop. Now it isn't like Terry's pointed out, it's not illegal, it's not uncommon actually. I believe Ted Cruz's campaign did it in Iowa. But as a reporter, I use information like this. Campaigns use it. It's a public record, but I'm pretty sure Kasich would not have.
Well, Terry, should it be a public record? I mean, should it be a public record that you took off the 2006 election? You decided you're not going to vote this time.
Well, those are public records.
I know they are,
and
but
normally
should they
you media people want to protect
I know.
public records. But I mean, lots of things happen. I can remember in 08 when a lady on Sunday drove a Prius up my driveway and said, "You've got to right now today go down to Veterans Memorial and vote, because if you wait till election day, it'll be so crowded you won't be able to vote." Well, I knew that was what you might call BS, but both sides do things to push and motivate their voters. But legitimately, part of the protection against voter fraud is to make sure that those are public records, who's registered, who's not. And if you find a house, like I remember down in Gallia County, where you had 52 people asking for absentee ballots from that one address with all kind of different names, that was a way to find out, as they did, that something was chicanery.
How many were there? 52?
I think 52, 2010.
How many voters in Ohio?
But once it was exposed that they were requesting absentee ballots, not many people sent them
We didn't
back.
get 53. Okay.
So the system worked.
Yes,
It is
yes.
important. It is important to point out, though, that sort of thing is nothing on the level of the widespread fraud that this commission, this federal commission, is supposedly looking at.
Right, but there's fraud in Ohio, and I can run through the counties, but it's not millions,
It's dozens.
maybe hundreds.
Okay. On this show, we have often questioned the need for the City of Columbus to offer 100% property tax breaks to developers in booming neighborhoods like the Short North. Owners and developers of $500,000 condos sometimes pay no property taxes for 10, even 15 years. Now a consultant hired by the city says city council members and the mayor have been too generous with the tax breaks. The report says some breaks in the Short North are too high, others totally unnecessary. The consultants urge the leaders to offer abatements in struggling neighborhoods like Linden, the Hilltop, and if they need incentives in places of the Short North, they should put some requirements on developers like give backs and make them build affordable housing. So Terry Casey, this is it. This consultants is still in a draft form. It's not final yet, but that's it. The gravy train is over for developers in the Short North?
No,
more
because a lot of the developers give back in campaign contributions to people on city council and people who are mayor, and I think it's shameless. I'm shameful when you look at like Easton, 60-some million, basically to subsidize building luxury condos and luxury apartments. That isn't bringing jobs, but I think some of the nonprofits that get tax breaks, I think there needs to be a lot more scrutiny of the tax breaks because they cost money. And in a lot of cases on the property tax breaks, they drive up the rest of the people like me who lives in Clintonville. If somebody else is not paying, then for the library, the zoo, the parks, all the rest, somebody else has got to make that up to yield the same amount. It costs most taxpayers more money.
There have been national studies that have looked at these incentives on a local level and on a statewide level, and they uniformly have concluded that they don't work and they're not necessary and they're too excessive. And they looked at Jobs Ohio. There was an organization that looked at all kinds of these public-private partnerships and the inducements that they've given. And they reached the same conclusion that the city reached, that Terry reached. I agree with them. Local property owners are the ones who pick up the slack.
But if it brings in jobs from out of state that are new jobs, that's
they
one
looked
thing.
at that too, and that's not the case.
Well, in some cases, Amazon has worked out well in central Ohio in terms of the number of new jobs brought in.
They're
But,
low-wage jobs.
well, the
Chrissy,
people who have those jobs are happy to have them.
They've become so common that developers, it's really a firm, secure part of their revenue formula now. The same way with expected rental income. The tax break they get from the city and or the state is there, and they figure it into their calculations when deciding whether to do a project.
They do, but if you look at the price of the rent in many of these areas where they're getting these abatements, they don't need the tax abatements to be able to make a profit. I mean, folks who are, look at the rent in the short north. I mean, those people can make money on their buildings. I mean, that's just, the study has shown that, and a lot of other things have as well. So the question is whether the city can kind of watchdog itself, reallocate some of these to areas where perhaps you could argue that developers need some help to make a profit, such as in Linden, in the Hilltop, that sort of area.
Okay, let's get to our last topic. School loyalty versus players' rights. That's the battle Chris Spielman wages with himself and his beloved Ohio State. The former OSU All-American linebacker is suing Ohio State, arguing that OSU and its corporate clients should compensate former athletes if the school is going to use their pictures or names to make money. The suit was sparked by banners at the shoe featuring Spielman and many other former players of Ohio State, but those banners also have Honda's logo on them. Nike also has a deal with Ohio State to sell vintage jerseys, including the names and numbers of former players. Cindy Tice, now you bleed scarlet and gray.
Yes, I do.
We learned you have a bobblehead of Chris Spielman that you carry to games.
I take him to away games and I hang him out the window and then people let me in.
So whose side are you on here?
I think Ohio State's greed is out of control. Chris Spielman was a wonderful player. He gave everything, and he is now a private citizen. He's actually a pitchman for another car company, and the university is making a lot of money with his likeness with another car company. And I think something has to change. And I don't think, you said this was loyalty versus something. He said that if he wins, he's going to return that money to the athletic department. I think he's looking out for his teammates just like he did when he actually played in the horseshoe.
And a key factor is Archie Griffin has joined with him in this lawsuit, which is key.
That's huge.
And I think the university, because if you look at what's been happening in the last 2 years to ESPN, their revenue, their viewership is down. Ultimately, the golden goose of those millions and millions are going to start tightening up. And a lot of Ohio State fans are now getting tired of being gouged for $195 for a ticket, getting gouged on the parking, getting gouged on everything, including concessions.
I don't see a whole lot of empty seats there, though, Terry.
Well, I understand, but ultimately, if you don't have an Urban Meyer there and a winning team, fans will turn on you because they don't like it when you gouge them too much.
Chrissy, this doesn't seem like, apparently there were some settlement talks, they didn't go anywhere, but this seems to be a lawsuit filed on principle. So what are the chances of a settlement before this goes to trial and maybe even appeals courts?
Well, I mean, Ohio State has to hope that there will be a settlement because otherwise this could be, Rob Aller, if you haven't read his column on it, look online. This
Columbus
could really,
Dispatch, yep.
That's right. This could be a landmark case. If Spielman says he would give the money back to OSU, he just did this because this is the right thing to do. And if that's really the case, he should, stay the course and see if the courts will side with apparently what he believes is the right thing, which is these student athletes and people after they've graduated.
And we call them student athletes is a little bit of a misnomer because if you talk to some of these athletes, the amount of time they have to put in, not just in the season, but off season in practice, the limits they have on what they can do.
But the argument now is, Terry, that the argument always has been that you're getting a free education, you're getting free room and board, and now schools are giving them the true cost of attendance. So you're giving them a little extra money for.
But when you're making coaches and athletic directors mega millionaires because of your labor and you're not sharing it equitably, that's not fair and proper.
Ohio State's losing this in the court of public opinion. If you want a seat to the Oklahoma game and you want to sit in the nosebleed section, they're $200. I was going to take my kids. I'm not going to.
Are they losing in the court of public opinion on this case because it's Spielman?
Because
And Archie.
Archie. I mean, he's the only two-time Heisman Trophy winner, and he's a big iconic figure at Ohio State.
And remember, there was a big loss that the NCAA had, I think, out in California.
Ed O'Bannon, UCLA.
Right. So I think the universities ought to realize that their monopoly and their ability to kind of abuse the athletes, the days are ticking towards the end.
Okay. Let's get to our final off-the-record parting shots, and we will start with Sandy.
Josh Mandel is the state treasurer. He's running for the U.S. Senate, and he came out and criticized the Anti-Defamation League for putting out a list of sins from an alt-right organization. One of the people on the list came out and said there's no such thing as date rape, and he likened the media to ISIS. That's even over the top for Josh. One of the reasons why we know about the constitutional crisis that we're facing right now is because of the media. Josh, knock it off.
Okay. Terry.
I predict that in Clintonville versus City Hall, things are going to heat up more because they not only want to take Indianola and hundreds of new apartments, but they want to take it from 4 lanes down to 2. And now they want to close 315, the main exit off there, in order to get to Clintonville. And they say, oh, that's okay. You can go another way where you have.
Temporary closure, though.
No, it'll be permanent, and they'll have 2 different traffic lights and 3 turns to get to Clintonville. People aren't going to be happy with that.
And I talked to folks in Dublin and Worthington.
I understand.
Chrissy.
Well, I don't know if Rich Cordray cares about my views on this, but he has got to do more to convince me that he's getting in this race. This week was really the first time when I've seen any evidence that the man wants a whole lot of attention. And so to convince me, which I don't know if you care, Rich, you need to do a little more to show him getting in this race.
An interesting part of the Spielman case is he's agreed, as Sandy said, to give back whatever money he makes in the lawsuit to the person or the university he's suing. I wonder if a judge is going to allow that, because that seems to create some kind of a conflict of interest in that the university, if they settle, will just get that money back. Anyway, that is Columbus on the Record for this week. Check us out online. Continue the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, and you can watch each and every episode while you're on vacation at our website, wosu.org/COTR. For our crew and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.